Yo, what's going on gamers? It's Ryan 6 Days Week, and in this video, we're going over the Frost Wyvern boss fight, where I'm going to show you all the abilities and attacks, as well as my general strategy in fighting this boss melee. This is, to date, the highest HP boss in the game, and probably the most valuable boss since it's the only way to get Froststone Ore, which is Dark and Darker's endgame crafting material. To get to the Frost Wyvern, you do have to travel to the Ice Abyss, so the next layer in the Ice Caverns, and navigate to the center, which requires you to clear 2 harpies on the way. Alright, now let's get started looking at the basic abilities, which more or less appear randomly throughout the boss fight. First, we have the tail attacks. The rear attack, which only happens if you're standing behind the Frost Wyvern, can be jumped or spaced. You won't really see this attack that often, especially in solos. The next attack, which is the spin tail attack, can be jumped and spaced as well. You'll see this much more frequently, especially in solos if you're fighting this boss melee. I personally will opt to spacing out the attack opposed to jumping, but combining the two is the safest way to dodge this move. Next, we have the forward swipes or forward attacks from the left and right hand of the boss. Now there's a pretty long windup for this attack, so yes, you can space it, but I do suggest learning the jump timing, since this is one of the best times to get in damage on the boss's head. Just jumping in the direction of the swipe can put you in the perfect position for a headshot with any melee weapon. So just look for the hand that reaches back and jump backwards diagonally in the direction that it attacks to. These left and right hand swipes can combo back to back, so you could pop off a lot of DPS during these attacks. Next, we have the 2-hand slam, which can be pretty lethal. This move does heavy AoE damage and applies knockback and slow effects. The main tells of the 2-hand slam is the fact that the wyvern will lean forward, roar, and then lurch back. This is your cue to move away as soon as possible. The AoE zone is more in front of the wyvern than centered, but do be careful when fighting this in teams and space even if you're behind, since the wyvern can spin around and track you mid-move. The wyvern does have quite a long reset animation after using this move, so it is a fairly reliable time to get 1 or 2 hits in on the head of the wyvern. Additionally, though this move does appear randomly throughout the fight, it seems to be on around a 30-second cooldown timer, so after each slam, you have around half a minute before you have to start looking out for another slam. Alright, next we have the ground leap. So if the 2-hand slam doesn't kill you, this move probably will. It is by far the most frustrating move to deal with since it's fast, has a huge AoE, and will knock you back in the direction that it comes from, most likely into the void. To dodge this move, you need to be moving left or right with some space between you and the wyvern. Too close and, well, you're gonna get hit. Also, if you can, and I know it can be habitual, do not jump when strafing away from this move. Jumping will just increase your knockback distance if you do manage to get hit. So stay rooted to the ground and just move left or right without your weapon in hand. If the Frost Wyvern is rotating towards you, then triggers this attack, strafe away from the direction of the rotation. So never cross through the sightline of the wyvern. Additionally, never try to counter-strafe this attack since it triggers far too quick for you to avoid it. When fighting the wyvern as a team, pay attention to where the body of the wyvern is facing. It will leap in that direction, not necessarily where the head is pointed towards. The wyvern's ground leap and the wyvern's 2-hand slam attack have fairly similar indicators when they're going to trigger. For both moves, the wyvern will lean forward and roar, but the pitch for the ground slam is slightly lower than the ground leap. Pay attention closely here. There's also a very slight visual difference in the effects, as the roar of the slam does show some white sound waves and the roar of the leap does not. We'll talk more about this move in the fight sequence section, but in general, as long as you are moving in one direction, so not attempting to counter-strafe this move, you will be fine. Next, we have the ground ice bolt, which is by far my favorite move to get a headshot in, and it's fairly reliable. To dodge this move, all you need to do is move left or right. Now I do suggest tap strafing as you would a skeleton archer, since this move does not have excellent tracking associated with it. This will save you some space when you do need to dodge the leap. Give yourself a little bit of space too when dodging this move, since the wyvern extends its head after each ground ice bolt launch. This is where you could get in a free headshot. Do be warned that every ice bolt can combo into a ground leap, so just be ready for that. And finally, to wrap up the basic moves, we have the Air Ice Bolt and Air Dive combos, which honestly are probably the easiest ones to dodge, as they have a lot of windup time, have a pretty clear indicator since the Wyvern will lift up into the air before anything happens, and all you need to do to dodge them is move left or right with a lot of buffer time. Alright, now before we take a look at the phase transitions, let's take a look at an entire fight sequence so you can see all the moves in action and truly see how random they are. During the wake up period of the Frost Wyvern fight, and during its flight phases, the Wyvern is immune to damage, but can still be debuffed. Here, you're going to see us tap strafe to dodge these ice bolts so we can save as much room as we can in the event that we need a full strafe for the dive. For the tail swipe, as well as the following air bolt combo, just being spaced away and moving to the side is enough to dodge it. Here, for the slam, we space far back, and we punish it with 2 hits. Then we return to maintaining space in front of the Ice Wyvern and sneaking in a hit per Ice Bolt just so we could dodge those leaps. And then that brings us to our first transition phase. Okay, now let's talk about the Wyvern's transition phases, which happen at every 25% missing HP for the Wyvern. The first phase, which is the single direction Frost Breath, can be dealt with in 2 ways. The first way is by standing behind an ice block. Now these blocks will spawn in groups of 3 right before each phase, since the Wyvern spits out 3 ice bolts. To dodge these phase ice bolts, again, just strafe in either direction, treat it as a regular air ice bolt, but in this case it will always be in groups of 3. The second way to dodge the very first transition phase, again the single directional Frost Breath, is by following the flight path of the Frost Wyvern and then standing directly below it. In the past, you could crouch, shift crouch, or use a utility item to slow your sliding speed, but that no longer applies after wipe 5. So, just stand right below the Wyvern as close to the edge as you can and tank the push. The damaging component of this phase can be ignored unless you slide to the opposite edge of the arena, so that's why it's important that you stand right under the Wyvern and as close to the edge as you can. This method should really only be used as a backup in the event that you don't have a good ice block placement. If you do manage to break the central ice floor, so the ice that sits above the Wyvern's egg, you can squat in there as well to dodge this first phase attack. For transition phase 2, so after you damage away another 25% total HP of the Wyvern, it will use the omnidirectional Frost Breath attack. For this one, again, you just stand behind an ice block, so make sure an ice block separates you and the Wyvern. For phase 3, the last transition phase, again, this happens at another 25% total health and damage, you need to stand in front of an ice block, so make sure that you are between an ice block and the Wyvern. Alright, now to summarize the 3 transition phases, they all will be triggered at 25% total health and damage to the Wyvern. Each phase starts with the Wyvern leaping into the air and launching 3 ice bolts towards a player. To dodge these ice bolts, just strafe left or strafe right. These ice bolts create ice blocks, which are used to dodge the Ice Wyvern's phase attack. For the first phase, you stand behind an ice block, so make sure an ice block separates you and the Wyvern. For the second phase, do the same, stand behind an ice block. For the third phase, this is where you switch it up. This is where you stand in front of an ice block, so make sure an ice block separates you and the outer edge of the arena. Alright gamers, that's all the info you need to take on the Ice Wyvern, and you can do this with any class, as melee, as a solo. It is a very difficult fight though, so be prepared to lose a lot of kits and a lot of time learning this boss. For the rest of this video, I'll play out a single phase with a couple of different classes and different weapons so you could get a feel of the timing for swinging your weapons and when you should exactly attack the Wyvern. The narrated portion of this video is going to end here, but if you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment them down below or find me on Twitch, typically Tuesdays and Thursdays, and ask me there.